The late afternoon sun cast a warm orange glow across the quiet neighborhood as the mother stood beside her car, holding her daughter's overnight bags with a tight grip. Lily and Emma, both 6 years old and full of energy, bounced with excitement, their matching backpacks slightly too big for their small frames. Their father had pulled up moments earlier in his gray SUV, stepping out with his usual charming smile, the kind that always seemed a little too rehearsed. The twins ran toward him, arms wide open, their laughter echoing down the street. The mother forced herself to smile, hiding the gnawing tension in her stomach. Custody exchanges were never easy. The court had ruled for joint custody, despite her concerns. There was no proven danger, only her instincts, which everyone dismissed. Everything will be fine, she told herself, trying to believe it. As the girls hugged their father tightly, he crouched down to their level, ruffling their hair. "We're gonna have so much fun," he said warmly. She stepped forward hesitantly. "Please make sure they take their allergy meds, and call me if anything changes," she said softly. He looked up at her briefly, nodded without saying a word, and turned back to the girls. It was always like that. Distant, cold, but never outright alarming. He opened the car door and helped the twins in, buckling them carefully, checking the straps like any responsible parent would. Then, he closed the doors, waved one last time, and got into the driver's seat. The mother raised her hand, her smile faltering. Her eyes locked with Emma's through the window for a brief moment. Emma smiled, mouthing something her mother couldn't hear. Then the SUV pulled away slowly, disappearing around the corner. The sound of the tires faded into silence. She stood there longer than she meant to, watching the empty street, the quiet returning. For a reason she couldn't name, her chest felt heavier than usual, her heart thudding with unease. She shook it off, turned back to her car, and drove home, never imagining that it would be the last time she'd see her daughters' faces in person. Sunday evening crept in with no sign of the twins. The mother sat by the window, phone in hand, her eyes darting to the clock every few minutes. They were supposed to be home by 5 p.m., a routine, court-ordered return time. She had already called twice with no response. Now it was 6:30. She tried again, straight to voicemail. Her fingers trembled slightly as she left a message, her voice calm but strained. "Hey, just wondering if you're running late. Please call me back." By 7:15, her messages had grown more urgent. "It's past time, and I haven't heard from you. Please, I need to know they're okay." She tried texting, hoping for a single word in reply. Nothing. The silence wrapped around her like a cold blanket. Her mind raced through scenarios: car trouble, a dead phone, maybe he decided to let them sleep over one more night and forgot to call. But none of it felt right. By 9 p.m., fear had fully gripped her. She got in her car and drove to his apartment complex. The parking lot was quiet, the SUV wasn't there. She walked up to his door, knocked hard, then banged louder, calling his name. No answer. She tried peeking through a window but saw only darkness. The blinds were drawn. She stood there for a long minute, heart pounding, before calling 911. An officer arrived within the hour, listened to her story, and knocked on the door himself. When there was still no answer, he radioed for permission to enter. With the landlord's help, they opened the door. Inside, the apartment was eerily clean, too clean. No clutter, no toys, no signs of children. The drawers were empty, clothes gone from the closets. It looked like someone had moved out in a hurry. There were no signs of struggle, but also no indication that two little girls had lived there for the weekend. Their toothbrushes weren't in the bathroom. Their clothes weren't in the hamper. The mother stood just inside the door, frozen, a lump rising in her throat. "Where are they?" she whispered. The officer stepped outside and made a call. What started as a delayed drop-off quickly escalated. Within hours, a missing persons report was filed. By morning, local news had picked up the story. Photos of Lily and Emma flashed across screens with the caption, "Missing, last seen with father." The mother, now surrounded by detectives and reporters, couldn't stop shaking. Her instincts had screamed something was wrong, and now the nightmare had begun. Her babies were gone, and their father had vanished too. Detectives wasted no time pulling surveillance footage from every possible location along the likely routes the father could have taken. They pored over hours of grainy gas station, highway, and traffic camera recordings. For nearly 2 days, nothing surfaced. Then, a break, Just before midnight on the Friday he picked up the twins, his gray SUV was spotted at a small, isolated gas station off a rural highway 2 counties away. The timestamp placed it less than 4 hours after the custody exchange. The footage showed the vehicle pulling in, headlights off. The father stepped out wearing a baseball cap pulled low and dark clothing. He kept his head down as he filled the tank, glanced around nervously, then quickly got back in the driver's seat. He never went inside the store, never interacted with anyone. But through the tinted back window, a flash of movement, 2 small silhouettes shifting in the backseat, confirmed the girls were still with him at that point. Investigators visited the gas station the same afternoon they retrieved the footage. They searched the surrounding area, combed the woods behind the property, even brought in tracking dogs. Nothing. No tire marks, no fresh footprints, no discarded items. It was as if he had vanished into the forest. Later that evening, a hiker stumbled upon an abandoned vehicle half a mile from a dirt logging road, deep in the woods and well off any official path. It was the SUV. Overgrown branches had been pulled across it, as if to camouflage it. Inside, the car was mostly stripped. The glove compartment hung open. But what they found inside chilled everyone. On the passenger seat was a pink hair tie, neatly looped around the base of the gearshift. On the floor lay a small crumpled piece of paper, torn from a coloring book. It was a child's drawing, stick figures of 2 girls holding hands beneath a dark scribbled sky. Between them, a tall figure loomed in black. In shaky, childish handwriting were the words, "Don't let him take us again." The message struck investigators like a punch to the chest. Was the father him, in the message? Or was he protecting them from someone else? Back at headquarters, the mother was shown the drawing. She gasped, instantly recognizing Emma's handwriting. Her knees buckled. She wrote that, she whispered. "She's scared." They were scared. For the first time, detectives began considering a different angle. Maybe the father wasn't just hiding with the girls, maybe he was hiding them from someone. But who? And why take such extreme measures? With no footprints, no trails, and no digital clues, the father's phone had been turned off hours after the gas station sighting. The investigation was left with more questions than answers. The only certainty was this: the girls were gone, and something far darker than a custody dispute had just begun to surface. The father's mother, Elaine, had remained quiet during the investigation, unsure of what to believe. She hadn't spoken to her son in months, not since the custody arrangements started unraveling. They'd grown distant over the years, but something about the news coverage didn't sit right with her. She watched every update, eyes glued to the screen, heart sinking each time they showed Lily and Emma's photos. Then, a nagging memory surfaced. Her son once mentioned fixing up the cabin for emergencies. It was a family-owned property tucked deep in the northern woods, abandoned for nearly a decade. No one had been there in years. On a gray and cold Wednesday morning, Elaine packed a bag and drove north. The road to the cabin was barely visible, swallowed by weeds and branches. It was a place meant to be forgotten, and yet something urged her forward. As she reached the clearing, the structure stood like a ghost from the past, weather-worn, windows streaked with dirt, and the front porch sagging under age and neglect. She hesitated before stepping out of the car. The trees loomed tall around her, the silence pressing against her ears. With trembling hands, she pulled out the old key from her purse and approached the door. The lock turned with a reluctant click. The smell of dust, pine, and something older greeted her as the door creaked open. The air inside was still, heavy with time. Dust blanketed every surface, cobwebs dangled from the ceiling corners, and the floor creaked under her every step. She called out instinctively, "Hello. Are you here?" though she expected no answer. She moved slowly through the main room, taking in the forgotten furniture, the long-dead fireplace, the worn-out curtains still hanging limply over the windows. But then, something strange caught her eye, a pair of small, pink shoes neatly placed on the front doormat inside the cabin. She froze. Her breath caught in her throat. Those weren't there before, she was sure of it. Her knees wobbled as she knelt down to touch them. They were clean, not dusty like the rest of the room. Almost recent. "Lily's," she whispered, tears welling in her eyes. She stood abruptly and started searching the house, room by room. She opened the old guest room, empty. The kitchen, untouched. Then, she noticed faint footprints in the dust leading toward the back of the house. Her pulse quickened. She followed them to a narrow door under the stairs that she had forgotten even existed. It led to the basement. She flipped the light switch, nothing. Grabbing a flashlight from a kitchen drawer, she slowly opened the door and descended the creaking wooden steps. The basement was darker, colder. Boxes lined the walls, old furniture covered in sheets, and the smell of mildew hung thick. But something was off. One section of the wall looked newer, less dusty, almost like it had been disturbed. Then she saw it, a heavy, steel door bolted shut in the far corner. She had never seen it before. A modern lock clamped it tightly shut, scratch marks marring the floor just beneath it. Her hand trembled as she reached out to touch the handle. Panic surged. She backed away and fumbled with her phone. Within minutes, she was on the line with the police, her voice shaky but urgent. I think he brought them here." As she waited, she kept staring at the steel door. What had her son built behind it? Why had he hidden it? And were Lily and Emma ever inside? Her heart told her the answer was yes. But her soul feared it might already be too late. Police arrived at the cabin just after dusk, their patrol lights casting eerie red and blue pulses across the forest clearing. Elaine met them at the door, her face pale, hands trembling, pointing toward the basement like she couldn't say the words out loud. The officers, flashlights and tools in hand, descended the staircase with slow, cautious steps, the wooden planks creaking beneath their boots. The air grew colder as they moved deeper underground, the musty scent of damp wood and age pressing in. When they reached the steel door, they paused. It looked entirely out of place, modern, heavy-duty, with a thick padlock and reinforced hinges. Not something one would expect in an old family cabin. The lead officer inspected it, noting the fresh scuff marks on the floor, as if the door had been opened and shut recently, possibly many times. The lock was new, but poorly installed. With a few minutes of careful work and a bolt cutter, it gave way with a loud metallic snap that echoed through the basement. The door creaked open, revealing a short hallway barely 5 feet long, leading to a small room at the end. The office's flashlights swept across the interior, and all three of them froze. It wasn't just a room. It was a makeshift living space. 2 small twin beds, neatly made with matching pink blankets. A plastic table in the corner, covered in coloring books, broken crayons, and a stack of picture books. The walls were covered in drawings, bright suns, flowers, and crude family portraits. One showed a man holding hands with 2 little girls. Above it, a name had been scrawled in purple marker, Daddy. A half-full water bottle sat on the floor next to a tiny sock. On the table was a partially eaten granola bar. Everything looked lived in, recent. Not abandoned. Not old. The officers radioed in immediately. We've got signs of occupancy. 2 children may have been kept here. Elaine stood at the top of the stairs, her hand clamped over her mouth. When they allowed her down, she took one look at the beds and collapsed to her knees, sobbing. He brought them here, she cried. He really brought them here. A crime scene unit was called in. Every surface was photographed, samples collected, fingerprints lifted. And tucked behind the mattress of one of the beds, a detective found a small, spiral notebook with scribbles in a child's handwriting. Pages filled with simple thoughts. I miss Mommy, we can't go outside, Daddy says we're safe here. But the final page carried a chilling note in uneven block letters. Uncle came again. We had to be quiet. Daddy got mad. We don't want to go with him. The implications sent shockwaves through the investigative team. Not only were the girls likely held here, someone else had come looking for them. Someone the children feared. Though the room showed no signs of violence, it also held no signs of its current occupants. It was clear they had been moved, again. Recently. Possibly within the last 48 hours. Elaine clutched the notebook to her chest. He was protecting them, she whispered through tears. All this time, he was trying to keep them safe. The cabin was sealed off and guarded overnight. The steel door stood wide open now, revealing not just a hidden room, but a terrifying secret. The father hadn't kidnapped his daughters. He had been shielding them. From something. Or someone. And now, whoever had taken them again was still out there. Back at the station, the evidence recovered from the hidden basement room was under urgent analysis. But one item in particular drew immediate attention, a dusty security hub tucked behind a false panel in the far corner of the basement. It was crude, homemade, but functional, a hard drive, a few mounted cameras, and a battery-powered recording system. Wired to capture what happened inside the hidden room. Forensics powered it up. The device whirred to life, flickering with a faint blue light. After several minutes, they accessed the video files, revealing grainy footage of the twins, Lily and Emma, inside the room. The timestamps showed weeks of recordings. Detectives sat in silence as they watched. The early clips showed the girls playing with toys, coloring at the little table, and curling up on the beds. They looked quiet but not terrified. Their father appeared often, gently talking with them, helping them brush their hair, reading from children's books. In one video, he knelt beside Lily, helping her sound out a word from a picture book. He wasn't angry or erratic, he looked like a man desperate to hold his family together. Sometimes, he paused and sat with his head in his hands, overwhelmed. One night, he whispered, "Just a little longer. I promise, girls. I'll find a way." But then, the footage began to change. In a clip dated just days before Elaine's arrival at the cabin, a new voice echoed faintly on the recording. It was deep, gravelly, male, coming from beyond the door. The girls stiffened. Their father stood up fast, his face turning pale, his body tense. He moved quickly to the door, pressed his back against it, and hissed, "Not now. They're sleeping." A muffled reply came, "You don't call the shots anymore." The next moment, the feed cut out for nearly an hour. When it resumed, the father sat alone, breathing heavily, his hands trembling. One of the girls cried softly in the background. Investigators enhanced the audio. In another clip, just before the camera system powered down for good, the father could be heard saying, "He's getting too close. We have to move again. Tonight." It was the last entry. The footage stunned the entire team. It shifted the entire narrative of the case. The man who had vanished with his daughters hadn't been running from the law, he'd been running from someone else. Someone dangerous. And that someone had just been identified. An image caught from the lens reflection, barely visible, showed the face of a man standing just outside the door. A partial side profile, but enough for the facial recognition software to match it. The result came back within hours. Marcus Albright, the father's estranged brother. Criminal record spanning assault, child endangerment, and an arrest for unlawful confinement, though that case was dropped years ago due to lack of evidence. He had no known address, no family contact, and had apparently disappeared from public records almost 2 years ago. But now he was back, and somehow, he had found the cabin. The realization struck hard. The father had been hiding his daughters from his own brother. Not out of fear of custody loss, but out of fear for their lives. What remained unknown was where they had gone next. The father's plan had ended abruptly. Had he succeeded in moving them safely again, or had Marcus finally caught up? Every second felt heavier now. They had proof the girls were alive just days ago. But their window to find them was narrowing fast. With Marcus Albright now identified as the man in the footage, the case took a sharp and terrifying turn. Until that moment, most believed the father was solely responsible for the girls' disappearance. But now, the story unfolding was far more complicated, and more disturbing. Detectives scrambled to reassemble the puzzle, this time viewing everything through a different lens. The father wasn't the abductor. He had been the shield. Marcus had always been a shadowy figure in the family, rarely mentioned, deliberately forgotten. Records showed he had spent most of his adult life drifting from job to job, with multiple arrests, restraining orders, and a string of addresses across 3 states. One detail stood out like a scream in a quiet room. 15 years ago, the father had filed for a protective order against Marcus, citing concerns for the safety of future children. At the time, it had raised eyebrows but was ultimately dismissed as speculative paranoia. Now, it felt like prophecy. Detectives dug deeper. Interviews with distant relatives and old acquaintances painted Marcus as manipulative, emotionally unstable, and violent when challenged. He had once been institutionalized after a violent outburst at a family gathering, but was released under outpatient conditions. Shortly after, he vanished, off the radar completely. So why reappear now? And why target the twins? A digital forensics unit uncovered something alarming. An old email account linked to the father had been accessed remotely 6 months earlier. Logs traced it back to a motel Wi-Fi network registered under a fake name. Surveillance footage from that date showed a bearded man with a scar above his left eyebrow, Marcus. It appeared he had been tracking his brother for months, waiting for the right moment. The theory formed rapidly. When the custody agreement was finalized and the father gained partial access to the twins, Marcus saw his chance. The father must have discovered the breach. And instead of reporting it, knowing how little trust the courts or police had in him, he took matters into his own hands. He pulled the girls into hiding. And he had almost succeeded. Until Marcus caught up. Phone records showed the father had made 2 calls from a burner phone a week before his final disappearance, both to an untraceable number. Investigators now believed he had tried negotiating with Marcus, likely pleading with him to leave the girls alone. It hadn't worked. Back at the cabin, more evidence emerged, a trail of muddy footprints leading to the rear exit. They matched a different shoe size than the father's. Marcus had been inside, possibly more than once. It was unclear whether the final departure from the cabin had been voluntary or forced. The most haunting discovery came from an overlooked box buried under floorboards near the steel door. Inside were childhood photographs of the twins with their father, dried flower bracelets, a small toy music box, and a note. Written hastily on a torn envelope in the father's handwriting, it read, "If you find this and I'm not here, know that I tried. I tried to save them from him. I'm not the monster they'll say I am. But he is. Please, find my girls. Don't let him win." Elaine, the grandmother, was the one who read it aloud, tears running silently down her cheeks. She didn't need anyone to explain. She knew then and there, her son had died trying to protect his daughters. Whether he was alive or not, one truth echoed through the room: Marcus had them now. The nationwide manhunt expanded immediately. The FBI was brought in. Amber alerts were reissued. Roadblocks set up across 3 states. The image of Marcus Albright was plastered across every news channel. And the focus narrowed. Somewhere out there, 2 little girls were still alive, and time was running out. The breakthrough came from an unexpected place. In a quiet farming town over 600 miles from the cabin, a woman named Marla Jennings called the local sheriff to report something unsettling. She lived on the edge of town, near an old, rundown farmhouse that had been rented out a few weeks earlier by a man who kept to himself. She hadn't thought much of it, until she noticed 2 small faces peeking through a cracked attic window. The girls looked frightened, barely visible behind the glass. They didn't wave. They didn't smile. They just stared. Within the hour, deputies arrived at the property, careful not to raise suspicion. The house was quiet, the yard overgrown, an old truck in the back with missing plates. They circled the home, confirming movement inside but no response to knocks or shouts. That's when a federal task force, already monitoring reports in the area, was alerted. Within 30 minutes, a full tactical team surrounded the house. The raid was swift and silent. Officers breached the front door while others secured the perimeter. Inside, the air was musty and thick. Rooms were sparse, just the basics: a mattress on the floor, canned food, and personal belongings hastily thrown into boxes. But it was the locked attic door that drew everyone's attention. When they pried it open, they found Lily and Emma curled together on a thin mattress, clutching each other, their faces pale, their eyes wide and terrified. They didn't scream. They didn't cry. They just stared at the strangers in black uniforms. One officer slowly stepped forward and knelt. "You're safe now," he said gently. "No one's going to hurt you." The girls didn't speak at first. They were dehydrated, scared, and malnourished, but otherwise unharmed. A medic moved in while the rest of the team swept the house, and that's when they found Marcus Albright. He had been hiding in a crawlspace beneath the kitchen, armed with a hunting knife and a loaded revolver. The standoff lasted mere minutes. When ordered out, he tried to fight. It ended with him being restrained and taken into custody, bruised and screaming incoherently about protecting his legacy and finishing what he started. His words were rambling, disconnected, delusional. News of the rescue broke that night. The twins were taken to a hospital for evaluation, surrounded by doctors, social workers, and finally, their mother, who collapsed in sobs the moment she laid eyes on them. She held them tightly, whispering apologies, her voice breaking between breaths. Lily whispered, "Daddy said he wouldn't let the bad man get us," before falling asleep in her mother's arms. Marcus was charged with multiple federal crimes, including kidnapping, unlawful confinement, child endangerment, and interstate flight from justice. He refused to answer most questions during interrogation, offering only cryptic remarks about fixing what his brother broke. Psych evaluations followed, with experts quickly determining he posed an ongoing and severe threat. But one question remained: what happened to the girl's father? 2 days after the rescue, a body was found buried in a shallow grave just behind the farmhouse. Dental records confirmed it was him. He had died protecting his daughters, stabbed multiple times, likely during the final confrontation with Marcus. Forensics suggested he held Marcus off long enough to allow the girls to be hidden upstairs, buying them time. The funeral was quiet, attended only by close family. Elaine spoke through tears, holding a framed photo of her son smiling beside his daughters. He was never the monster they thought he was. He was a father who gave everything to protect his girls. The twins, now safe, began a long journey of recovery, counseling, therapy, and slowly rebuilding a life stolen by fear. They were surrounded by love and finally out of hiding. Their mother promised them they would never again have to be afraid of the dark. In the end, what was once a presumed kidnapping case became a harrowing story of sacrifice, survival, and a father's unwavering love. And though the scars would remain, Lily and Emma had been brought home, not just alive, but with the truth.